The night began with a quiet tension that no one could explain, a strange mix of excitement and uncertainty that floated in the corridors of the award venue like a soft whisper waiting to turn into a storm. The lights inside the main hall flickered with warm gold. The air carried the scent of perfume, camera flashes, and polished wood floors, and people moved with the kind of restless energy that always came before something unforgettable. But no one expected that the most powerful moment of the night would happen not on the stage, not under the cameras, not in the middle of a speech or a performance, but in a narrow hallway on the second floor, where two hearts met in a way that left everyone around them frozen in disbelief. It started earlier that evening, when Keanu walked into the venue with his usual gentle presence, wearing a quiet smile that never tried to demand attention yet always pulled attention toward him. He greeted people politely, offered warm nods, hugged a few old friends, and carried himself with the same calm humility that made the world admire him. But those who watched him closely could see something different in his eyes that night. There was a softness, a faraway glow, as if he had been thinking about someone the entire day, someone whose presence meant more than all the noise surrounding him. And that someone was Sandra. Sandra arrived later, stepping out of her car with that familiar combination of grace and nervous energy. She wore a simple but elegant dress, nothing too loud, nothing too flashy, but stunning in the way only she could make something feel alive with emotion. Her smile was bright, her eyes carried a quiet depth, and her steps felt almost hesitant, as if she was bracing herself for a night she wasn't sure she was ready for. She had been trying to hide it for months, the growing emotions swirling inside her, the way her heart raced every time she saw Keanu, the way her hands trembled when she thought about the moments they shared, the way her breath caught when he said her name. She told herself she had control, that these feelings were too old, too complicated, too impossible to bring back to life. But her heart knew she was lying. Their paths finally crossed backstage, behind the curtains where the noise of the audience softened into a gentle hum. Sandra was adjusting the sleeve of her dress, trying to distract herself from the anxiety in her chest, when she felt a familiar presence beside her. She didn't have to look up to know who it was. Keanu had a way of entering a space without saying anything, yet his energy spoke before he did. She lifted her head slowly, and there he was, standing a few feet away, his eyes holding a warmth that made her forget every thought she had rehearsed to keep her feelings hidden. The moment their eyes met, the world around them seemed to pause. It wasn't dramatic or loud. It was soft, quiet, and incredibly real. Keanu smiled first, a small smile that carried years of friendship, memories, and unspoken emotions. Sandra felt her heart slip out of rhythm, but she forced herself to stay still, to not move too close, to not show the truth she had fought so hard to bury. But Keanu took one slow step toward her, and when he spoke, his voice was gentle enough to melt every piece of control she still held. "Hey," he said softly, "you look beautiful tonight." Sandra felt her breath catch for a moment. It wasn't the compliment that shook her, but the sincerity in his tone, the way he looked at her as if she was the only person in the building. She smiled back, trying to hide the trembling in her voice. "Thank you," she whispered. "And you look peaceful. I don't know how you always do that." Keanu chuckled lightly, rubbing the back of his neck in that shy way he always did when he didn't know how to respond. "I'm not as peaceful as I look," he admitted. "Actually, I've been nervous about tonight." "Nervous?" she asked. "Why?" He hesitated for a moment, as if weighing whether to tell her the truth. Sandra watched anxiety flicker in his gaze for a heartbeat, but then he looked down the hallway and took a slow breath. "I guess there are moments in life when you want something to happen, but you also fear what might follow," he said. "I've been feeling that a lot lately." Sandra felt her pulse quicken. She tried to keep her voice steady. "And is tonight one of those moments?" Keanu looked at her again, and this time there was something raw in his eyes, something vulnerable, something almost confessional. But before he could say anything else, someone called his name from the end of the hall. He turned slightly, nodded politely, and then looked back at Sandra with an expression that almost seemed apologetic. "I have to go for a second," he said. "But can you stay near the hallway after your segment? I want to talk to you." Her heart dropped straight into her stomach, and she nodded without speaking because she knew that if she opened her mouth, her voice might betray everything she tried to hide. He gave her one last warm look before walking away, leaving Sandra standing alone with the weight of 100 emotions pressing into her chest. What she didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that the hallway they planned to meet in would become the center of a moment that would spread across social media. a moment that would reveal emotions they had both tried to hide for so long. The night continued quietly, with speeches, applause, and backstage whispers filling the air. Sandra performed her segment beautifully, smiling at the crowd, hiding her inner shaking. Keanu sat in the audience watching her with the kind of deep admiration most people never saw on his face, and every time she glanced at him, her heart tightened. They drifted toward the hallway after the show, separately, careful not to draw attention. Sandra arrived first, stepping into the quiet corridor where the lights were softer, and the noise from the audience faded into a distant echo. She leaned against the wall, trying to slow her breathing, trying to prepare herself for a conversation she wasn't sure she was ready to have. But when Keanu appeared at the far end of the hallway, all her thoughts scattered like fragile pieces blown by a sudden wind. He walked toward her slowly, his expression serious yet gentle, as if he had been rehearsing his words but wasn't sure they were enough. When he finally reached her, he stopped close enough for her to feel the warmth of his presence, close enough for the air between them to thicken with everything they had never said. "Thank you for waiting," he murmured. "I said I would," she replied quietly. Keanu took a breath, and Sandra could see the conflict in his eyes, the vulnerability, the fear, the hope. "Sandra," he said softly, "there's something I need to tell you, something I can't keep inside anymore." But before he could speak another word, Sandra noticed movement in the corner of her eye. Two fans, young and excited, had wandered into the hallway by mistake, holding their phones up as they recognized the two familiar faces standing so close. Sandra panicked for a moment, but before she could step back, Keanu instinctively reached out, gently placing his hands on her arms to steady her. It was a soft touch, protective and warm, a natural reaction born from years of caring about her. The fans gasped, stunned by what they saw. Keanu holding Sandra with quiet tenderness, their faces only inches apart, their emotions impossible to hide. The hallway froze. The fans stared. Sandra's breath trembled. And Keanu did not let go. Not right away. Not even when he heard the click of their phones. Instead, he looked her in the eyes with a depth that sent a shiver through her entire body, a depth that whispered one truth louder than anything he had said that night. But before she could understand what that truth meant, before she could speak or move or breathe properly, one of the fans whispered something that made both of their hearts stop. "Did you see that? Oh my God, they're in love." Sandra felt the world tilt. Keanu tightened his hold just slightly. And in that fragile, electric moment, everything they had buried for years cracked open. Right as someone else stepped into the hallway, someone whose presence changed everything. The truth that almost slipped out. The hallway fell into a strange silence, the kind that stretches moments into something heavier and more fragile than anyone expects. Keanu still held Sandra gently by her arms, not in a dramatic or exaggerated way, but with a soft, steady touch that felt natural, protective, and deeply familiar. Sandra's heart raced as she tried to understand what was happening, but everything around her moved too fast and too slow at the same time. The two fans stood frozen with their phones raised, whispering excitedly as if they had just witnessed something rare and precious. And then the moment shifted when a new voice entered the scene, breaking everything open. "Is everything all right here?" The voice belonged to one of the event managers, a woman named Laura, who had worked with both Keanu and Sandra for years. She was kind, organized, always calm, but when she stepped into the hallway that night, she carried an expression of sharp curiosity. She had seen too much and knew both of them too well to believe this was just a friendly moment. Her eyes moved slowly from Keanu's hands resting on Sandra's arms, to Sandra's trembling breath, to the two fans who looked like they were debating whether they should post the photos instantly or treasure them for a while before the world discovered them. Keanu reacted first, gently lowering his hands but not stepping away entirely. He cleared his throat softly, trying to regain control of a situation he hadn't meant to create. "Yeah," he said in his quiet tone. "Everything's fine. They just walked in at the wrong time." Sandra nodded, though her mind felt messy, tangled with 100 questions and emotions that refused to settle. She could feel the imprint of his touch still warm on her skin, and that simple warmth made her thoughts spiral even faster. She tried to keep her voice steady when she added, "We were just talking, nothing more." But Laura's eyes narrowed just slightly. She didn't say anything, but her silence said enough. She had seen countless actors interact backstage, and she had seen friendly gestures, supportive ones, casual ones. She had never seen Keanu hold someone the way he held Sandra in that moment. There was something raw about it, something tender and unguarded, something that didn't belong to a script or a rehearsal. But she didn't press them. She simply gave a small nod and gently guided the fans away before security could appear. "Come with me," she told them. "Let's make sure you don't get lost again." The fans left reluctantly, whispering excitedly as they disappeared around the corner. And then the hallway belonged to Keanu and Sandra again, but now the air felt heavier, thicker, and layered with the consequences of what had just happened. Keanu stepped back slightly, running his hand through his hair, something he always did when he felt guilty or overwhelmed. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I didn't mean to put you in an awkward position." Sandra shook her head immediately, trying to ease the tension she saw building in his shoulders. "No, you were just trying to steady me. It's okay, really." But it was okay, she knew it, he knew it, and the silence between them made the truth even clearer. She took a breath, trying to slow her racing thoughts. "Keanu, earlier you said you wanted to talk to me. You said you were nervous, that there was something you needed to tell me." She hesitated, her voice softening. "Was it about us?" Keanu's eyes shifted, filled with something deeper, something almost painful. He stepped closer again, but not as openly as before. This time he carried a careful caution in the way he moved, as if he was holding a truth too fragile to be handled recklessly. "Sandra," he murmured, "yes, it was about us, or about something I've been feeling, something I've been avoiding for too long." Her heart tightened. She wanted to ask him to continue, to just say it, to finally open the door they had both kept closed for years. The moment felt right, the hallway quiet again, the world slowing enough for words to matter. But fate, as always, had its own timing. Before Keanu could speak another word, someone else entered the hallway. This time it was not a fan or a manager. It was someone neither of them expected tonight. Tom, one of Keanu's closest friends and co-stars, stepped into the corridor with a puzzled expression. He had been searching for Keanu backstage, unaware that he was interrupting a moment that had been years in the making. "Keanu," Tom said, "we've been looking for you. The producers want final confirmations for the closing sequence." Keanu blinked, torn between responsibility and the truth he had been ready to reveal. He turned toward Tom politely, then looked back at Sandra with eyes full of apology. "Just give me a few minutes," he said. "I'll be right there." Tom nodded but didn't leave immediately. Instead, his gaze moved between them, and his brows furrowed just enough to show he sensed something unusual. He wasn't the type to gossip or pry, but he also wasn't blind. He finally left with a simple nod, but Sandra could tell he had questions he wasn't ready to voice yet. Once Tom disappeared, Keanu exhaled deeply, rubbing his hand against his forehead. This night, it wasn't supposed to go like this. Sandra stepped closer, wanting to ease the tension she felt radiating from him. "It's okay," she whispered. "You can tell me later, whenever you're ready." But Keanu shook his head slowly. "No, if I don't say this now, I might never get another chance. Too many years have passed already, too many missed moments." His voice trembled slightly, and Sandra felt her breath stop. He looked directly into her eyes, his expression raw and unguarded. "Sandra, I..." But before the words came out, they heard footsteps approaching again. Only this time it wasn't fans, it wasn't staff. It was reporters. 3 of them turned the corner carrying cameras and microphones, each one lit with the sharp urgency of people searching for a story. One pointed immediately at Keanu and Sandra. Another lowered his voice as he whispered to his team, "That's them. That's the hallway." Sandra panicked. She stepped back instinctively, her heart thundering in her chest. She knew how quickly a simple moment could be twisted, exaggerated, turned into something it was. And she knew that once the media got a hold of anything, it spread like wildfire. Keanu reacted faster than she did. He stepped in front of her, not to hide her completely, but to give her enough cover so she could breathe. His protective instinct showed instantly, and it sent a new rush of emotion through her chest. "Please," Keanu said to the reporters, keeping his voice calm but firm, "this is a private moment. No photos, no questions." But reporters never listened easily, especially when the world had been waiting for years to know the truth about the quiet bond between these two. One of them raised his microphone and called out, "Keanu, were you holding Sandra just now? Is there something happening between you two?" Another chimed in quickly, "Fans saw it. Are you in a relationship?" Sandra felt her throat close. She wasn't ready for this. She wasn't ready to face 1,000 headlines, a million assumptions, a storm of speculation that would twist something delicate into something loud and messy. Keanu sensed her panic immediately. He stepped closer to her, turning slightly so his body shielded hers from the cameras. "We're not talking about this right now," he said firmly. But one reporter stepped forward, ignoring every boundary. "Keanu, Sandra, people say love is impossible to hide. Is that true tonight?" Sandra's breath broke. Keanu turned sharply toward the reporter, and for a moment Sandra saw something rare in his eyes. Not anger, but fear. Fear of losing something he wasn't ready to lose again. Fear that tonight would change everything before he had the chance to speak his truth. He leaned closer to Sandra and whispered, "I'm so sorry. I should have protected you better than this." Her heart twisted painfully. "Keanu, this isn't your fault." But before he could respond, security finally arrived, guiding the reporters out of the hallway. The noise faded, the lights softened again, and the world settled into a quieter rhythm. Keanu turned back to Sandra, his voice heavy with emotion. "I need to tell you what I was trying to say earlier." Sandra swallowed hard. "I'm listening." He opened his mouth, his expression full of a truth he had held back for too long, a truth she had been afraid to hope for. But then, the sound of a single notification echoed through the hallway. A message. A post. A ping that vibrated through the silence like a warning. Sandra pulled out her phone with trembling hands. Her eyes widened. Her breath disappeared. Her heart dropped. Because right there, already spreading across social media, was a blurry photo taken only minutes earlier. Keanu holding her gently in the hallway. And the caption written by the fan read, "They aren't hiding anymore." Sandra looked up at Keanu with tears forming in her eyes. And Keanu whispered, "Oh no, this is going to change everything," when the world decided for them. The image spread faster than either of them could have imagined. One moment, it was just a single blurry photo taken by an excited fan. The next, it had begun moving through the internet with the speed of a wildfire carried by a strong wind. Sandra stood frozen in the quiet hallway, staring at the glowing screen of her phone as if it held a secret she had never meant to reveal. The picture showed everything she feared and hoped, captured in the soft moment when Keanu's hands were wrapped gently around her arms, his face close to hers, their eyes locked in a silence that said more than any headline ever could. The internet didn't need clarity, it only needed emotion, and this image had plenty of it. Keanu watched Sandra's reaction closely, his chest tightening with worry as he saw confusion, fear, vulnerability, and something deeper flash across her face. He stepped closer, careful not to touch her this time, because even though he wanted to comfort her, he knew every gesture now carried weight. "Sandra," he whispered, "please don't panic. We can fix this. We can explain." But Sandra wasn't thinking about explanations. She was thinking about the countless ways the world could twist this moment into something loud, messy, and cruel. She had lived long enough under public scrutiny to know how easily people believed what they wanted, how easily they forgot that actors were human beings with fragile hearts and complicated lives. She had fought for years to keep her personal world private, to protect the people she cared about from the noise of fame. And now, standing in a dim hallway with Keanu's picture spreading across the world, she felt that privacy slipping through her fingers. She took a slow, shaky breath. "Keanu, this is already everywhere. People are going to talk. They're going to create stories that aren't true. They're going to drag this into places we never wanted to go." Keanu nodded, his expression soft with empathy. "I know, but we've faced harder things before. We can face this too." Sandra shook her head gently, her voice thick with emotion. "This is different. This isn't a movie premiere or a small rumor. This is us, or at least what people think is us." His eyes softened. "There is an us, Sandra." The words slipped out before he could stop them. She froze, her breath catching in her throat. The hallway suddenly felt smaller, warmer, heavier. For years she had danced around the truth buried between them, the quiet affection, the shared glances, the emotional gravity that always pulled them back to each other no matter how far they drifted. Hearing him say it, simply quietly, without hiding, made her heart tremble in a way that terrified and comforted her at the same time. But before she could respond, someone else rushed down the hallway, Laura, the event manager. She looked flustered, her headset slightly crooked, her steps quick and sharp. Keanu, Sandra, you both need to come with me right now. The producers want a word. They saw the photo. Everyone is asking questions. Sandra felt her stomach twist. Keanu looked at her with silent reassurance before nodding at Laura. All right, he said. We're coming. They followed Laura through a private corridor that led to a smaller backstage office. The room was brightly lit, with papers spread across a table and two producers pacing anxiously. The moment Sandra and Keanu entered, the pacing stopped. We just saw the image, one producer said, lifting a tablet with the photo displayed. This is blowing up everywhere already. We need to handle this before it spirals. Keanu stayed calm, crossing his arms lightly, though Sandra could tell he was tense. It was a misunderstanding, he explained. We weren't. But the second producer interrupted. Misunderstanding or not, people believe what they see, and right now they think you two just confirmed a long-rumored relationship. We need to know if there's any truth at all, not for gossip, simply to know how to control the narrative. Sandra stiffened, her eyes dropping to the floor. She didn't want to lie. She didn't want to tell the whole truth either. Her heart was too full, too vulnerable, too unprepared to answer a question that had haunted her for years. What exactly were they? Keanu's voice was steady when he answered. We'll address it. Just give us time. Tonight isn't the right moment. The producers exchanged glances. One nodded reluctantly. Fine, but we can't protect this story for long. Be ready to make a statement soon. Laura guided them out again, leaving them in a quieter corner behind the stage. The muffled sound of applause filled the air as another award was being presented. The contrast between the noise and the heavy silence around them made the moment feel even more surreal. Sandra leaned against the wall, closing her eyes for a moment as she tried to steady her thoughts. Everything she had built around her heart, her walls, her logic, her careful boundaries, felt suddenly fragile, shaken by one photo that wasn't even supposed to happen. Sandra, Keanu said softly, stepping closer, though still keeping a respectful distance. Please don't let this scare you away. She opened her eyes slowly, meeting his gaze. I'm not scared of you, Keanu. I'm scared of everything else. The world, the noise, the pressure. I've lived through it before, and I know how heavy it gets. He nodded gently, understanding more than she expected. I know, I've seen what the world can do, but I'm here, I'm not going anywhere. She felt tears prick at her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming sincerity in his voice. Keanu, earlier, before everything happened, you were trying to tell me something. I need to know what it was. His breath hitched slightly and he stepped closer, his eyes searching hers with quiet intensity. I was going to tell you the truth I should have said years ago. Her heart pounded so loudly she could almost hear it echoing in the narrow space between them. She wanted him to say it. She needed him to say it. But part of her feared what would come next, the irreversible shift that would follow truth. Keanu, she whispered, you can tell me now. He opened his mouth, the words forming slowly, deeply. Sandra, But before he could finish, her phone buzzed again. She hesitated, not wanting to break the moment, but the vibration continued urgently. She finally looked down. The notification wasn't from a fan or a reporter. It was from her publicist, and the message made her blood run cold. The photo is everywhere. Major outlets already pushing the story. Call me immediately. This could affect your upcoming project. Her breath trembled. Keanu watched her reaction, growing even more worried. What is it? He asked. She looked up slowly, her voice tight. They're using the photo to spin new stories. Stories about me, about you, about a scandal that doesn't exist. Keanu's jaw tightened. Then we'll shut it down. It's not that simple, she whispered, her voice shaking. Contracts are involved, reputations, entire film schedules. They're saying I've been hiding a relationship from the studio, that I lied to them. Keanu, this could cost me my next project. He stepped forward immediately, his instinct to protect her stronger than anything else. Sandra, I will fix this. I won't let them hurt you because of something that's my fault. She shook her head quickly. This isn't about blame, this is about timing. Everything is happening too fast. Just then they heard footsteps approaching again. These footsteps were slow, deliberate, almost hesitant. Sandra and Keanu both turned. It wasn't a reporter or staff or a producer. It was someone they both knew. Someone who never got involved in rumors or drama. Someone who always stayed quiet, balanced, private. someone whose presence now meant that the situation had reached a level neither of them expected. It was Sandra's manager. She looked at Sandra with a deep seriousness in her eyes and said quietly, "We need to talk, now, and Keanu, you should hear this too." Sandra's stomach dropped. Keanu's expression hardened with concern. And in the heavy silence that followed, Sandra's manager whispered something that made both of their hearts stop. "The studio wants an emergency meeting. Tonight. They think the photo confirms a romantic relationship between you two, and they're demanding answers before midnight." Sandra felt the world spin. Keanu reached out instinctively, almost touching her arm again, but stopping just before his fingers met her skin. And then Sandra whispered, voice trembling with fear she could no longer hide, "Keanu, what if this ruins everything?" He looked into her eyes with a depth that shook her completely. "Then we decide what everything really means." But before she could respond, the manager added one final sentence that froze both of them in place. "And Sandra, they think you've been lying about your feelings for years." The confession that almost happened. Sandra felt the weight of her manager's words hit her like a sudden drop, the kind that steals your breath before you even understand what's happening. The hallway around her seemed to tilt, the soft lights blurring for a moment as she tried to steady herself. She had faced difficult situations throughout her career, from intense roles that challenged her emotionally to personal losses that reshaped her heart, but nothing had prepared her for this. Nothing had prepared her for the world suddenly believing she had been hiding a love she never dared to speak aloud. A love that had lived quietly in the corners of her heart for years. A love she never had the courage to claim. Keanu stood beside her, watching her with a steady intensity that was both comforting and painful. He wanted to fix everything, to protect her from the storm gathering outside these walls, but even he knew some storms couldn't be stopped with kindness alone. Some storms demanded truth, and truth was often the hardest thing to give. Her manager took a deep breath, folding her hands in front of her, her voice low but firm. "Sandra, the studio executives have seen the photo. They've already had emergency calls. They want to know if you're in a relationship with Keanu. They're saying it affects your next contract. They're saying you hid this from them." Sandra closed her eyes for a brief moment, fighting back the rising wave of panic. "I didn't hide anything," she whispered. "There's nothing to hide. We weren't doing anything wrong." Her manager nodded slowly, but her expression remained troubled. "I know, but they don't see it that way. They think you've been dishonest about your personal life because of the emotional tone of the photo. They think it means something more." Keanu finally spoke, his voice steady but heavy. "It was a private moment. They're assuming things because it's easier than asking. We weren't trying to hide anything." Her manager looked at him with a soft sympathy, then back at Sandra. "The problem is they didn't ask, they decided, and they want you in a meeting tonight to clear this up." Sandra felt her heart sink. "Tonight? Can't it wait until tomorrow?" Her manager shook her head. "They said it can't wait. The story is spreading too fast. They're afraid of losing control of the narrative." Keanu rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture Sandra knew well. It meant he was thinking hard, looking for a calm path through the chaos. "Then we go," he said gently. "We face it together." His words made Sandra's breath catch. There was something powerful in hearing him say "together," something she had wanted for years but never allowed herself to imagine too deeply. But she pushed the feeling aside because fear still curled tightly in her chest. Her manager exhaled, then added quietly, "Before we go in there, they're going to ask questions, direct ones, and you'll need to answer honestly." Sandra stiffened. "Honestly," she repeated, her voice faint. Keanu turned toward her, something uncertain flickering in his eyes. "Sandra." Her manager stepped back to give them space, but her presence lingered like a reminder of the consequences waiting for them outside this hallway. Sandra turned away from Keanu for a moment, leaning her hand against the wall, her thoughts spinning. Everything was happening too fast. The photo, the rumors, the pressure, the upcoming meeting, it all felt overwhelming. The truth she feared facing most wasn't the studio's assumptions, but the one that lived quietly, relentlessly in her own heart. Keanu approached her slowly, stopping close enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence behind her. "Sandra," he whispered softly, "look at me." She hesitated before turning, her eyes meeting his with a vulnerability she rarely allowed anyone to see. "I know you're scared," he said gently. I know you're worried about your career, the pressure, the world watching, but you don't have to face any of this alone. A small tear escaped down her cheek, and she wiped it away quickly, embarrassed. Keanu, if the studio thinks I've lied, if they think I'm hiding something, it could cost everything I've worked for. He stepped even closer now, not touching her, but offering a presence that felt like shelter. Then tell them the truth, he murmured. Tell them exactly what this is or what it is. Her breath quivered, and what if I don't know how to define it? Keanu's voice softened into something she felt more than heard. You do know, maybe you've been afraid to say it, maybe I have too, but we know. Her heart pounded so hard it almost hurt. Keanu, what were you trying to tell me earlier, before all of this started, before the fans took the photo? His expression shifted, raw, open, honest. I was going to tell you the truth, he said slowly, the truth I've kept inside for years. She swallowed hard, the hallway felt impossibly quiet. Then say it now. But before he could speak, before the moment could unfold into the confession they had been circling around for so long, her manager's voice returned sharply. They're ready for you, we need to go now. The moment shattered. Keanu closed his eyes briefly, as if silently begging the universe for just a little more time. But time had a cruel way of slipping through their hands. They followed her manager through another hallway, this one narrower and colder, the walls lined with framed posters from past events. Sandra walked beside Keanu in silence, her heart aching from the words she almost heard and the words she was afraid to face. They reached a private conference room where the studio executives waited. The room was dimmer than the rest of the building, lit by only a few overhead lights. A long table stood in the middle, surrounded by tense expressions and stiff postures. Sandra and Keanu stepped inside. The door closed behind them with a soft thud that felt heavier than it should. Thank you both for coming, an executive said, his voice calm but sharp. We need to address the photo. Sandra nodded slowly. We understand. They sat at the table side by side, though not touching. Even so, Sandra felt Keanu's presence like an anchor beside her, grounding her in a moment that felt on the edge of spiraling out of control. The executives wasted no time. We need to ask the question directly, one of them said. Are you two in a romantic relationship? The words cut through the room like a blade. Sandra felt her pulse quicken. She turned slightly, glancing at Keanu. His eyes met hers with a softness that made everything more complicated. She opened her mouth to speak, but Keanu gently touched her arm, not a dramatic gesture, just a quiet, steady touch, asking silently to answer first. We are not in a relationship, he began softly. Sandra's stomach twisted. He continued, choosing every word carefully. But there is something between us. The room stiffened. Sandra felt her entire chest tighten. Keanu kept going, his voice steady even as emotion flickered behind his eyes. Something real, something we haven't defined because we didn't want the world to shape it for us. The executives exchanged looks. One leaned forward. Then why does the photo look so intimate? Keanu didn't hesitate. Because I care about her. Sandra's breath caught. Another executive asked, Sandra, do you care for him in the same way? Sandra's voice trembled. Every emotion she had buried for years pressed against her heart, demanding to be acknowledged. She finally opened her mouth. But before she could say a single word, someone knocked on the door urgently. The door opened. A staff member stepped in breathless. Sorry to interrupt, but you need to see this immediately. He held up a tablet. Sandra's heart stopped when she saw what was on the screen. Another photo. But this time, much clearer. Taken from a different angle. Keanu holding Sandra even closer than the first one revealed. And the caption already spreading across the internet read. Keanu finally admits his love. The room exploded into whispers. Sandra stared frozen. Keanu looked at her with fear and longing mixed in his eyes. Her manager whispered sharply behind her. Sandra, this changes everything. Sandra felt her breath break, her world tilting, her heart shaking as she whispered back. Then what happens now? Keanu reached for her hand under the table and gently held it, just as the executives leaned in and asked, So tell us the truth, is this love? the answer she wasn't ready to give. The question hung in the air like a weight nobody knew how to touch without breaking something precious. The executives leaned forward with sharpened attention, their eyes fixed on Sandra and Keanu as if this moment determined the future of more than just careers. The quiet hum of the overhead lights filled the silence, amplifying the tension inside the room. Sandra felt her heart beating fast and uneven, each pulse echoing louder than the last. Keanu's hand under the table held hers gently, not gripping, not forcing, just offering warmth, comfort, and something deeper, something she had avoided naming for years. The executive repeated the question slowly, giving it gravity. Is this love? Sandra felt a tremor run through her chest. She wanted to speak. She wanted to tell the truth. But what truth? The truth she lived with for years, hidden inside quiet moments and glances that meant more than words. Or the truth the world demanded now, the one shaped by headlines, blurry photos, and assumptions that grew like wildfire. Keanu squeezed her hand softly, as if telling her she didn't need to be afraid. His eyes held something profound: patience, vulnerability, courage. He was ready. He was ready to face the consequences. He was ready to tell the world what he had kept in his heart for so long, but Sandra wasn't sure if she was. She swallowed hard before answering, her voice quiet. I don't think this question should be answered like this. The room fell into a deeper stillness. One executive frowned. Sandra, we're asking because this affects your next project. Your contract explicitly states. She interrupted with more strength this time. I know what the contract says. I know exactly what it says. But feelings aren't something you announce under pressure. They aren't part of negotiations. They aren't something you define because someone demands clarity. Keanu watched her, admiration quietly shining through the tension on his face. Another executive leaned in. Then it sounds like you're not denying it. Her heart pounded faster. I'm saying this is personal. But the executives weren't satisfied. Personal didn't fit into their plans, their marketing strategies, or their control. Personal meant unpredictable, and unpredictable was something studios hated. Sandra, a senior producer, said calmly, we respect your privacy, but right now the public thinks this is a love story you kept hidden, and they think the photo confirms it. We need to know how to respond. She lowered her gaze, her hands trembling slightly even in Keanu's gentle hold. The photo shows a moment, nothing more. And was that moment romantic? The producer pressed. She hesitated. Keanu looked at her with steady eyes, silently urging her to breathe. She finally answered, it was emotional, that's all I'll say. Keanu didn't look hurt. He didn't withdraw his hand. He understood her better than anyone else in the room. He knew she wasn't denying him. She was protecting herself, him, their history, and the fragile truth between them. An executive scribbled something into a notebook before saying, fine, we'll release a statement saying it was a misunderstanding. But understand this, if any new evidence appears, the story will escalate again. Keanu's jaw tightened. There is no evidence the moment was innocent. But Sandra looked away. Innocent wasn't the right word. The moment was tender, unplanned, and real in ways she couldn't admit yet. It wasn't staged. It wasn't rehearsed. And maybe the world saw more honesty in that single moment than she had allowed herself to feel. The meeting ended shortly after, with promises of damage control and media management. As Sandra and Keanu left the room with her manager following close behind, the air outside felt heavy, thick with everything unsaid. Her manager pulled her aside from the hallway. Sandra, you need to be extremely careful from now on. The press will keep digging. They'll search for any sign of romance. Anything that looks emotional will be amplified. Sandra nodded quietly, her mind spinning with anxiety and confusion. Her manager softened her voice. I know this is hard. I know you care about him, but the industry won't wait for your heart to catch up. It will chew you up if you're not prepared. Sandra felt a dull ache grow behind her ribs. I don't want to lose anything because of a photo. Her manager hesitated, then said something that pierced her deeper. You might lose more by running from the truth. And with that, she walked away, leaving Sandra alone in the longer, emptier part of the hallway. Keanu approached her slowly. Are you all right? She nodded, but her eyes didn't match the gesture. I'm sorry they put you through that, he said softly. You didn't put me through anything, she whispered. The world did. He hesitated for a moment, then spoke with quiet determination. I meant what I said in there. Something real exists between us, something I'm not afraid to admit anymore. Her stomach tightened. Keanu, please. No, he replied gently but firmly. I need to say this. I've spent years pretending I didn't feel anything, trying to protect you, protect myself, protect our friendship. But I can't keep pretending after today. Her eyes filled with tears. And what if I'm not ready? Keanu stepped closer, his voice soft but steady. Then I'll wait. I'll wait until you are. You don't have to rush. You don't have to say anything you're not ready to say, but I need you to know. Sandra looked desperately into his eyes. I need you to know that I care about you in a way I've never cared about anyone. Her breath shattered. Keanu continued, his voice trembling slightly for the first time. When that fan took the photo, I wasn't thinking about the world. I wasn't thinking about rumors. I was thinking about you. I reached for you because I care, because I always have. She closed her eyes, feeling tears slip down her cheeks. Keanu, this could change everything. He cupped her face gently, wiping one tear with his thumb. Maybe everything needs to change. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed again. She stepped back, wiped her tears, and checked the notification. Her face drained of color. What is it? Keanu asked quickly. Sandra handed him the phone with shaky fingers. On the screen was a new headline, spreading rapidly across social media. Exclusive, second video leaks. Keanu whispers something to Sandra moments before holding her. Keanu's expression hardened. Video, there was a video. Sandra nodded slowly, fear growing in her chest. And thousands are already sharing it. Keanu's voice lowered into a tone he rarely used, a protective, fierce tone. What does the video show? Sandra swallowed hard before whispering. It shows you walking toward me, and it looks like you were about to confess something. Keanu's breath hitched, and then her voice broke completely as she continued. And the caption says, this is the moment Keanu tells Sandra he's loved her for years. Keanu froze. Sandra trembled. And in the middle of that quiet hallway, while chaos exploded online, she whispered the words she feared most. Keanu, what if the world already knows the truth before we say it? He stepped closer, lowering his forehead to hers, his voice soft but heavy. Then maybe it's time we stop hiding. But before either of them could say another word, her manager ran toward them, breathless and pale. Sandra, she said urgently, there's something you need to see right now. Sandra's stomach clenched. What is it? Her manager hesitated, then whispered. The video has audio, and someone leaked a second clip. Keanu tensed. What clip? Her manager swallowed hard. The clip where Sandra, you whisper something back to him. Sandra felt the blood drain from her face. I didn't whisper anything. Her manager nodded slowly. You did, right before he held you. Keanu's heartbeat thudded in his ears. What did she say? Her manager whispered the words that would change everything. She said, I feel it too. Sandra gasped. Keanu's eyes widened. And the world outside kept spinning, ready to explode with a truth neither of them was prepared to face, the truth they could no longer outrun. Sandra stood frozen in the hallway, unable to breathe, unable to think, unable to understand how a single whispered sentence, one she didn't even remember saying, had become the center of a storm she never asked for. Her manager's words echoed inside her chest like a bell struck too hard. She said, I feel it too. Sandra felt her throat tighten as the meaning of those words settled over her. If the world believed she had confessed something to Keanu, everything changed. Her career, her privacy, her future, and most terrifying of all, her heart. Keanu stared at her in stunned silence, his breath uneven, his expression a mixture of shock, longing, and something stronger, something that looked like hope. For a moment, neither of them moved. The hallway felt impossibly still, as if time had pressed pause on everything that mattered. Finally, Keanu stepped closer, his voice soft but trembling. Sandra, did you really say that? Her eyes filled with tears, she tried desperately to blink away. I don't remember saying those words. The moment was a blur. Everything happened so fast. He nodded slowly, absorbing her words, but the question remained suspended between them like a fragile thread. But is it true? She closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the question settle deep within her. There were moments in life when silence protected you and moments when silence destroyed you. Tonight, silence felt like both. She opened her eyes again, her voice low. Keanu, I'm scared. He exhaled gently, his shoulders softening. You don't need to be scared of me. I'm not scared of you, she whispered. I'm scared of what this means. I'm scared of losing something important. I'm scared that if I say the wrong thing, we can't go back. He stepped even closer, close enough for her to feel the warmth of him, close enough that their breaths mingled in the still hallway. And what if we're not meant to go back? The question felt like a spark inside her chest, terrifying and warm at the same time. But before she could answer, her manager's phone beeped again. She looked at it, her expression tensing even more. We need to go, her manager said quietly. Now, reporters are swarming the building. They're saying they have the full video, including audio. Sandra's breath caught. Full video. Keanu frowned. What else is in it? People online claim they heard everything, her manager whispered. Your voice, his voice, the moment he held you, and the words you two said to each other. Sandra felt a deep ache form inside her chest. The world wasn't just watching, they were listening, interpreting, reshaping, and every second that passed made the truth harder to contain. As they moved toward a private exit, Keanu walked beside her, his presence grounding her even as panic threatened to rise. When they reached the exit door, her manager paused, giving both of them a moment alone before stepping outside into chaos. Keanu turned to Sandra, his voice calm but filled with quiet urgency. Before we walk out there, before the world decides for us, I need you to hear me. Her breath shook. Keanu, this might not be the right moment. It's the only moment we have, he said softly. Because once we step outside, everything changes, and I won't let the world take my truth away before you hear it. Sandra looked into his eyes, seeing the years of friendship, the unspoken emotions, the memories of all the moments they had shared, sweet ones, painful ones, unexpected ones. She saw every hidden feeling he had carried, every quiet gesture she ignored because she feared what acknowledging it would mean. Keanu took a slow breath. Sandra, I have loved you for a long time. Her heart stopped. His voice didn't waver. I hid it because I didn't want to complicate your life, because I didn't want to break our friendship, because I knew the world would never leave us alone if it ever found out. Her tears slipped down her cheeks quietly. But when I held you in that hallway, something inside me broke open, he continued. The fear, the hesitation, the excuses, they all fell apart, and I realized I couldn't hide anymore, not from you, not from myself. Sandra covered her mouth with trembling fingers. The weight of his confession filled the space between them with an intensity she had only dreamed of, never believing it would become real. But he wasn't finished. So I need to know, he whispered, his voice thick with vulnerability. Is it true? Did you feel something too? Something real? Sandra's tears blurred her vision as she tried to speak. For years she had kept her heart locked tightly behind fear, practicality, and self-protection. For years she told herself that timing, risk, and uncertainty mattered more than feeling. But now, standing here with Keanu looking at her in a way no one ever had, she realized the truth had always lived inside her, quietly, insistently, waiting for this moment. She took a breath that trembled like a fragile confession. Keanu, yes, I feel it too. His eyes softened with a full, aching relief. I felt it for years, she continued, her voice breaking. I just didn't know if you did, and I didn't want to lose what we had, so I buried it. I hid it. And I convinced myself it was better to live with the feeling quietly than risk everything. Keanu stepped forward and gathered her hands gently in his. You don't have to hide anymore. A tear rolled down her cheek as she whispered, but what if we ruin everything? He cupped her cheek tenderly. Sandra, maybe some things are worth the risk. She leaned into his touch, letting herself feel the warmth, the safety, the truth of him. For the first time in years, she wasn't afraid of what her heart wanted. But before the moment could settle, her manager burst back in through the door, panic sharp in her voice. Both of you, this just got worse. Sandra pulled away slightly, her heart dropping. Worse how? Her manager held up her phone, showing a live broadcast from outside the building. Hundreds of fans, dozens of reporters, bright lights, shouting voices, flashing cameras. And the headline across the screen. Breaking news. Full hallway video leaked. Uncensored audio confirms emotional confession between Keanu and Sandra. Keanu stiffened. What exactly did they hear? Her manager swallowed hard. Everything, from Keanu saying he needed to talk to you to the moment you whispered, "I feel it too." And even the part where you two said each other's names in that emotional way. Sandra felt heat rush to her face. They heard that. Her manager nodded grimly. Yes, and now everyone thinks you two confessed your love in a hallway. Keanu took a deep breath. Well, they're not wrong. Her manager blinked in surprise, then sighed heavily. You two need to decide how to handle this, right now, because in about 30 seconds you are going to step outside into absolute chaos. Sandra looked at Keanu, fear mixing with something brighter, something brave. What do we do? Keanu reached for her hand again, his eyes steady. We stop letting the world control our story. She took his hand. He held it firmly, and together they walked toward the exit. As the door opened, a wall of blinding lights, shouts, and flashing cameras erupted in front of them. Reporters leaned forward with microphones, fans screamed their names, photographers snapped hundreds of images at once. But Sandra didn't let go of his hand, and Keanu didn't let go of hers. They stepped into the storm side by side. Someone shouted, "Keanu, do you love Sandra?" Another yelled, "Sandra, is it true you said you feel the same?" Keanu squeezed her hand gently. Sandra took a breath, and for the first time, she didn't hide. She looked up at Keanu, then at the crowd, her voice soft but steady. "Yes," she said. Gasps echoed through the crowd. Reporters rushed forward. Fans screamed louder. And Keanu looked at her with a warmth that softened everything around them. Then he whispered just for her. "Finally." She smiled, tears in her eyes. Finally. The cameras flashed, the world exploded with noise. But in the middle of all of it, their hands stayed intertwined. Their truth stayed unshaken. And their hearts, quiet for years, finally spoke without fear. The hallway moment had not ruined everything. It had revealed everything. And now, together, they stepped into a future they had spent years running from. Not as rumors, not as secrets, but as something real, something chosen, something true.